I'm going to go ahead and give a little intro to our conversation tonight. Probably many of you already know. This is a conversation where we've invited Marisa. You probably know her as Design Team of One on Instagram. She's probably the hottest account on Instagram right now, at least my own favorite. And
Thanks.
I'm really happy to have her. And the purpose of this conversation is actually to explore how a day in the life of a designer actually looks like, because we probably get very conflicting information from different articles, different information sources, even different people that are posting content on Instagram. So there is no universal right answer, obviously. It depends, like designers like to say, but we're trying to give our students who are in this call, many of the Mento students, hi guys, and also everybody in the design community who's interested in exploring this topic, we're trying to give them a better overview or a very honest perspective on what you will actually be doing as UX designers. And so, before I move on into giving Marisa the space to introduce herself briefly, I just want to help people understand what is Mento, because probably you've seen that this is a UX Goodies Mento design team of one event. So there are all these actors involved. And just a couple of words about Mento. So we give you all a background and we introduce our students who are also in this call. And actually, this event was created especially for our students, to be able to give them an honest and transparent perspective of what they will be doing when they land their first and second and when they will land their UX jobs, which are not easy to land, but this is a topic for another conversation. But so as you probably know already, Mento is a bootcamp that we've launched this year, and this event is very aligned with our mission and what we hope sets us apart. And that is the fact that we're trying to give people a very real life understanding of what you will be doing as a UX designer, what UX design is, and basically prepare them for the real world and not something that's very sugar coated or unrealistic, and basically give people the right expectations for their job hunt and eventually for their first design job. So this is Mento in a nutshell. We plan on organizing these events on a monthly basis, maybe one day even weekly basis, but at first on a monthly basis. And this is the first event that we're opening to the entire community, because we understand that we don't want to gatekeep good content and have it just for our students in terms of events. We want to open up to the entire community and give as much value to the world as possible as well, not only to our students. And so on a monthly basis, we will be trying to host these types of events. So if you're interested, go follow Mento, join the Mento group on Meetup, or follow Mento Design Academy on Instagram. And since we're talking Instagram, go follow Marisa on Instagram as well. You'll thank me later. She's probably the best creator out there right now, design team of one. And I'm going to let her introduce herself and give us a little more detail on herself and her background.
Cool. Hi, everyone, and thanks, Iona, for inviting me to speak here today. So I'm a product and UX designer at Dgraph Labs, and we are a database startup based in San Francisco. I'm currently based in Vancouver, Canada, but I grew up in Hong Kong, and I also spent a substantial amount of time in London, England. And so that exposes me to different cultures and environments growing up, and I like to believe that makes me a more open-minded and creative person. I'm really passionate about psychology, which is my background, designing in the developer space and cognitive systems. But a lot of my interests are also outside of design, such as urban planning or marketing. And I believe that just helps me create a more holistic perspective when I design.
That's actually great, a great intro. It feels like, I mean, you probably do this very often, because it feels very natural to give this nice intro. Every time I have to give myself an intro, I am like, every time it's something different. And I think I'm just very inconsistent with how I talk about myself and my career. So kudos for a very nice, compelling intro. And I just want to take a moment to thank again everyone who joined. And we will be diving into some questions. A couple of questions came from our students, and other questions came from our Instagram community. And so we will try to address as many questions as possible under what we've decided to time box this event to 1 hour. And yeah, we're trying to make as much as possible from this event. So the first question, Marisa, is more, let's say, like it's still an introductory context creating question. And the question is, how did you decide to go for UX design as a career? And how did your career start?
Yeah. So before getting into design, I actually spent around 2 years as a research assistant in a psychology lab in my university. I loved everything about it, the people, the research topic, which was around how tech impact human happiness. However, the thing that I didn't like was that the pace was too slow. It takes on average around 2 years to publish a research paper. And I always think that by the time it's published, things are already different. And so I was really looking for something that's more fast paced, but allows me to apply the knowledge I have in psychology and also my love for understanding human behavior and motivations. And so what I did was I started scrolling on LinkedIn, like we scroll on social media, and I was checking out what people with a psychology background turn out to be in the field, their positions, their titles. And I reached out to some people and asked about their experience. And by that time, this whole UX UI thing, tech is still really new to me. And so to confirm that I really want to spend maybe the next 20 years doing, or even more, I did a boot camp. And back then the school was called Red Academy. Unfortunately, it was closed down during COVID in Vancouver. But I had an amazing time there, learned a lot, also made a lot of connections. And then at the same time, I was also organizing hackathons in my university. And that was kind of how I started getting into the developer space. I was surrounded by people who love solving challenges within a fixed time frame with different constraints. It's really that pragmatic and iterative mentality that drew me into the hackathon environment. And then from there, I kind of found my first job working in a design agency. And then I kind of quit because I feel like I was in a design bubble where everyone talks about design, which is great sometimes, but my mind was lacking, or it was looking for more stimulations from different perspectives. And so I left around 6 months after and joined Dgraph, which is where I'm at right now.
Wow, it sounds it's a very diverse background to come from. So you also have the academic perspective. You also explore the hackathons world, which is something that I always suggest to people who are looking to build some experience without being able to find their first job because they have no experience. We all know the vicious circle. So hackathons are a great way to experiment, to play with UX design. And indeed, in one way, they're quite similar to what you will be doing in the real life because you work with other people under constraints. But at the same time, they're quite different because in real life, things take a lot longer, and we'll move into exploring what design in real life actually looks like. But yeah, what a diverse background to come from. And it's really nice to learn about people who also I had no idea that you went through a boot camp, so it's good that touching the surprise.
One more thing I want to add with hackathons is that we often think that it's limited to 36 hours, 48 hours, but I actually spent some time during one of the hackathons. Our team decided that we want to continue on the project, and we actually spent half a year afterwards to continue on the project. Unfortunately, because I have other commitments, I kind of dropped out of it, but the team is still going, and they kind of turned into a company today. And so never underestimate what you can create out of hackathons.
This is a great point, and it's actually something that I was advertising as a potential best case scenario from hackathons, that the projects get continued if they're good ideas.
Hmm.
But it's nice to see that this is actually happening, and that I wasn't overly optimistic when talking about that. Yeah, really nice introduction to today's conversation. And my next questions would have been around your current job and what you do on a day-to-day basis, but I'm gonna introduce a new question, and that is, how was your bootcamp experience? What did you like, what did you not like, and what do you think makes a good bootcamp versus a bootcamp that, so what did this bootcamp bring you, and what would you have liked to be different or you felt was missing? So yeah, both sides of the story from the bootcamp experience.
Yeah. So my bootcamp, like I said, it's from Red Academy, this tech and design bootcamp school based in Vancouver. I believe they also have a school in Toronto. I actually don't know if they also closed down that location, but if anyone wants to check it out, they can feel free to do so. So it's the program is around 3 months long, and I personally, the most helpful part for me was to know, basically trying to understand how psychology connect with UX design at the first place, because that's where my background is, and I wanted to figure out if this is really something that I can work towards, if it's even possible. And so it feels like the concepts are actually a lot of the same concepts I learned in psychology, taking the time to understand human behaviors, human motivation. And I do that a lot in my research experience already. But it's almost like learning the right terms and knowing how to explain concepts in a UX or tech perspective. And so that was my biggest takeaway from the bootcamp. And we also have a lot of different add-on support, like we get resume reviews. We also get to definitely meet our alumni, kind of similar what we're doing right now. So I'm really glad I had this opportunity to give back to the community. And the Vancouver is also not a really big city, so I get to meet a lot of people here, kind of look at how they end up where they are. So that was really helpful. I think one cons I would say is the time frame. I would definitely love it to have it longer. I think there are a lot of important topics in UX that are just not brought up or slightly gone over. For example, accessibility. It's definitely not something that is prioritized during boot camps because of the time constraint given. And a lot more that I think designers nowadays should be more aware about. And so those are things that I might add if I get to design the course myself.
It's a great perspective, and I think that probably boot camps are kind of in a way reflecting the reality out there. They're mirroring the reality in terms of accessibility issues that many companies, and I think the industry as a whole, has yet to prioritize accessibility at the level that it should be prioritized. And I feel that there are still a lot of places where accessibility is like an afterthought. So we've built a solution, and now we try to make sure that it's accessible, but we don't start by understanding the accessibility issues that might arise. So I think that indeed it's like a chicken and egg dilemma, that bootcamps don't talk about accessibility, and maybe that's why we don't see a lot of concerns around accessibility in the work designers do. And I think that somebody should should start somewhere. And yeah, I think that education has the responsibility of talking about this as well, and building empathy for people who come from who come in with some sort of accessibility problem, or they can't use the product as you would envision it in a happy path. So yeah, it's a great perspective. It's super valuable. Thank you so much for sharing in brief the bootcamp experience with us. And I also feel that, I mean, bootcamps, they're like and we we tried as much as possible to fit in 6 months the most essential parts, the things that are critical, but also go into as much detail as possible without making it completely overwhelming. But yes, I truly understand this feeling that it's just not enough time. And I think that what matters is that you continue to learn, you continue to practice and apply and dive deeper into the topics that you learn about in your bootcamp. And so it's not, where I'm trying to get at is that it's never over after the bootcamp, after you graduate. It has to continue. The effort, the learning will continue forever. I'm still learning. I will be learning in 20 years from now. So it's just continuous learning from that.
I totally agree. I think joining a bootcamp is kind of like a starting point for any designers. It's kind of the place where your interests get ignited, and then you should take on the driver's seats in deciding on what you want to get deeper into, what you want to learn, what field you want to get in. And so I totally agree with that. Yeah.
So now this leads me to what should have been my second question. And that is, what are you currently doing on your job on a day-to-day? So what would a typical day in your life as a UX designer look like? I know that every day is different, but just that with the people that join kind of get a feeling of how a day in the life of a designer typically looks like.
Yep. So like I mentioned previously, I work at Dgraph Labs as a design lead, but what that really means, especially as a design team of one and the first design hire, is that my typical day might not look too typical for people who work in bigger organizations. And so what is special about my role at Dgraph is that I split my time between marketing and product. On the product side, I design surveys, create journey maps, personas, mockups, prototypes, the typical things you learn in a design bootcamp or when you are trying to get into design. Then there's a lot of back and forth between the developers, the CTO, and myself on iteration. Because of the size of our company, I was basically able to work with our CTO very closely on a daily basis. And then on the marketing side, I support any design front from website, ads, event assets, merch design, and video editing. So I'm really thankful for all these different opportunities I have. And I something that I preach on my account is that I really believe that you don't have to learn a lot. You don't have to only aim for big companies, and you can also have a really good learning experience from working in a startup environment. And so that being said, if I really have to choose one day to maybe explain how my day looks like, it would look something like in the morning, I have my stand up with my core team. And then that usually takes around 10 to 15 minutes, mostly just people reporting on what they're going to work on, what they worked on yesterday, and if there's any blockers for the day that might have to clarify or alignment issues to solve. And then I have an alignment meeting with my developers. This is also one tip that I want to give for maybe designers in the startup space, is that you have to find your allies. So I was really able to team up with my front-end developer, and he also taught me a lot about design systems. He has more years of experience in the industry. And so that was really helpful for me to even have a voice in the company. And then that takes around 30 minutes to an hour. And then I try to block off my calendar just for myself to work, basically just to do more technical stuff, just to get into my work zone. A lot of the times is spending time on Figma, prototyping, iterating on designs, and then also sometimes on Slack on communication. And then once a week, I would have a one-on-one with my manager. So that usually happens later during the day. We would go through some of my goals, if there's anything that has been blocking me or that I need more support on. And I really enjoy these one-on-one sessions with managers because it really allows me to take a step back and look at the bigger picture of understanding how I'm impacting different areas of my work. So for example, how it impacts marketing, how it impacts product, how it impacts the whole company's revenue. And so it's those times where I am allowed to pull myself out of those flow time of just pushing pixels and learning more about how a company functions in a more wide perspective. And also shout out to my manager. I think she's watching this. Had a really great time just learning so much from her. And then usually it's either like a design review session for a bit, and then mixing between that and then more work time. Yeah, so that's kind of how a typical day looks like. Usually if there are more things to follow up on, then we will have design critiques or design reviews afternoon during the day, just for more alignment purposes.
I think it's great that your account is called Design Team of One, and even in small design teams or in a design team of one, you still have to be very collaborative. This is what I get from sharing a day in your life as a designer. So I think that this is something we also try to evangelize in our bootcamp, that it's actually, you will be working with people, so not just design for people, but you also need to learn how to work with developers, how to work with product managers, how to communicate your design decisions, how to explain the rationale behind everything that you do, and be able to, just like you said, create relationships and find allies and so on. So this is one of the things that for me stands out from your description, and it's quite similar to what I am doing. Well, now I'm on maternity leave, but what I normally do in a day in my job at UiPath. I start by having the stand up with the entire team and everybody. So different roles come at the same table. Okay, now it's a Zoom table with the pandemic and all, but we used to meet physically and just align. This is how the day starts. You align with everyone. So it's it's very much about collaboration, being a UX designer. This is what I'm trying to say. And another important point that I want to take from what you described is that I was listening the other day to this podcast, New Layer. We also recommend it to our students. Probably many of you know it. So I was listening to an episode from New Layer that was talking about systems thinking, which is a skill that I hope we will also talk more about throughout the design industry, because it's super important. So they were talking about the fact that when people start out in the design industry, typically their role is more focused on a very tactical level. They work on, let's say, a small feature from the big product, and they don't have a lot of visibility, or they don't really understand how their design decisions will impact the future of the product, the future of the company, and so on. And I think that you're a great example that can be done even in the earlier years of your career. So you don't have to be very senior. You don't have to be necessarily a design, let's say, principal designer or whatever role in the career ladder of an organization, but you can be very involved in the high level picture and understand the impact that your work is having on the company and on the product in its entirety. So this is super valuable, and it goes to show that we can break preconceptions or what is traditionally thought of about junior roles, right? I hope I made my point.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's not about getting that title or getting not just about getting a seat on the table, like you said. It's more about being mindful of how your work is impacting the company, and how maybe a small step or some in terms of communication, something that you can say to improve that, the bridging between these different functional teams. So yes, I totally agree.
Okay, so I think we pretty much covered a lot of things that a designer typically does. We can go into more detail, but I think that I want to give the opportunity to channel other questions that our students and the Instagram community proposed. Just like, let's say, a bridge, a midway takeaway It's that you will be, as the role of a designer is pretty diverse. So in most companies, probably designers will not be required to also do marketing, but they may be, or maybe they will be required to, I don't know, do something that's not traditionally, that doesn't traditionally fall under the role of a designer. And I know that there's a lot of controversial conversations throughout the industry in terms of how the design role is understood and oftentimes misunderstood. But I also want to advise the students and everyone entering the design field that they should keep an open mind, and that there's a lot of opportunity for learning, even in exploring roles that, let's say, are complementary to the design role, to what is traditionally just UX design. So you are also creating visual assets, marketing materials, and that's great. That probably informs and builds like the system of work that you're doing for the company. So, and especially in startups and in small companies, I think that you will be doing a lot of things. So you will be, let's say, this design unicorn like you are, where you do a lot of things. And even if in some corners that's frowned upon, it may be that this is just a reality of work, and it's also a lot of learning to be made there. So I wouldn't necessarily advise against it. And you're an example. Yeah, exactly. And like per the last comment on the chat. Okay, so thank you. And yeah, just I didn't finish my point actually. So the point was that you will be doing a lot of alignment work, a lot of collaboration. You will be working also in your small little box many hours for many hours as a designer, devising the solutions, representing them in a way that they're easy to socialize and that people understand what they need to build or what they need to deliver to the users. And so you'll be doing a lot of prototyping, you'll be doing a lot of wireframing, anything that gets your solution across to your audience, which oftentimes is internal at this point of the design process. And also you will be doing a lot of communication work, which may sound very broad, but and it is very broad because you will be communicating with different stakeholders, different actors in the company. But communication skills are also something that you will be putting at great use, and building allies and building a good relationship with the people you work with. And that's important because you will also need to convince people many times. So you will have to defend your decisions. You will have to promote your decisions. And so building a relationship based on trust, and gaining people's trust in respect to your work, because we all know that everybody thinks they can comment on a design solution because it's most times it's visual, so everybody thinks they have a knack for visual things. And so it's really easy. I don't necessarily go and comment on the work of a developer, but on my design work everybody gets to comment. And so yeah, it's important to build communication skills and also resilience skills to help you get through these conversations that many times feel like they can be uncomfortable. But yeah, so communication skills and are also something that needs to be explored. So this is my, let's say, intermezzo. Sorry, it was quite long. Okay, I will move on to the next question, which is actually the first question that that came from one of our students, Akiko in Japan. Akiko is not able to join us because it's very, very late in Japan right now, but we are saying hi for when she sees the recording, and I'm gonna go ahead and ask her question. Her question is, how much time do you currently spend learning, and how do you learn right now? How do you continue learning routine or ritual after you are already in your first job? And
so I'm a big learner. I love learning. Just learning itself makes me really happy. And I don't know if a lot of people can relate, but I love learning everything. And I think okay, maybe everything is a little too much of a claim here, but one thing that I talk about even on my platform is that sometimes I feel like learning things outside of design actually brings me closer to design eventually. So that includes urban planning, which is kind of like designing a city, or understanding the process of how murals are put up in my city. So those are things that I'm really curious about, and it's really hard to explain what sparks my interest. I guess a lot it's in my everyday life, as cliche as that sounds. A bookstore I walk by, or a painting that I see on the wall, or understanding going into a restaurant and seeing how bad the customer flow is. I think those are some of the moments that I get inspired the most and really want to learn more about it. So apart from dedicating 1 hour to reading every day, I don't really have a structured learning plan in place, but reading is also something that I preach a lot. I think compared to articles and videos, it's definitely a more deep dive into a particular topic. And the author himself or herself also spend a substantial amount of time understanding that topic before they can write a book. And so there's a lot of value and nuggets of wisdom in it that I think reading can be replaced with just video watching or articles.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there's like this ladder of content complexity, if you want, and books are like the most complex thing you can read, you can consume on a particular topic. And I also know that you have this little game that you play with your audience where they select the next book you read, and then you come back. So that's really fun. And I also do it all the time. Read this, read that. It's really engaging. And reading is something that definitely also, I think, trains our mind into being more patient, into being able to invest some effort into consuming content. Because I think that the problem with today's content economy is that everything is so easy to digest. So we're always consuming content, and I think that we lost the power to stay focused, to put in some effort in consuming. So watching a video or swiping through a carousel on Instagram, it's effortless, and also probably the reward is not as big as when you put in some effort, as with everything in life. So yeah, I love the point about informing your design perspective and your design philosophy, if you want, from different other disciplines like architecture or art or urban design and so on. So I think that's something often overlooked. I think that people, especially in the early days of their design career, think that they should consume as much content on UX design as possible. So they focus on UX design only, when in fact it's really interesting to explore things that we can say in a way that they sit at the foundation of what UX design is today. So they basically architecture and, let's say, principles like form over function, which derives from architecture, and we also use it in UX design. So I think that moving away from UX design can make you feel closer to UX design ultimately, which is counterintuitive, but it's a valuable point. Okay, so this was one question, and I have another question from Akiko. So in your experience, no, so the question is, I jumped the question. So her question is, what motivates you the most currently? What's your biggest motivation right now in your work?
Yeah, I think this is a really tricky question. When I started thinking about it, I feel like I don't want to just pinpoint one thing or one moment and say that motivates me, even though it can be intrinsic, because we always talk about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. But how I interpret this question, or how I find my motivation, is more in the framework of when people say this is a marathon, not a sprint. So it has to be something that holds closely to my heart, and it's not a momentarily thing. And so I've been thinking about it, and what I really come to a conclusion is that I really want to make an impact, a positive impact. And that can be applied in so many different contexts. It can be in the work that I do every day in my company. It can be enriching the community, the design community, through Instagram. I also have this goal of publishing a book in the future where I would enrich the diversity in publishing. So those things, or even just having a short conversation with a friend where I can provide a new perspective or teach them something. I think those are kind of examples of what keeps me motivated to wake up in the morning and wanting to start my day. It's really hard to pinpoint, but I think that making a positive impact would be my answer. Yeah.
I think that it's also amazing that our job, I mean, with all the complexity that it entails, and it's difficult, it's not an easy job. I think that oftentimes even boot camps and many institutions out there tend to oversimplify what the UX design role entails in order to make it feel more accessible, and to, which is a good thing. You want to encourage people to pursue careers, to switch careers, and you don't want to make everything seem overly difficult and impossible to achieve. But at the same time, sometimes the role of a designer is oversimplified. But I think that even with its hard parts, the best part, I think universally speaking, is the fact that you can really make an impact on the lives of even if it's just one user. Sometimes I imagine that through the products that I build, I change the day, or the, let's say, the experience that one user has with my product, and it makes him happier or happy. And so that's like incredible to be able to achieve through your job. So I think that making an impact is something that we're privileged to be able to hope for. Okay, and a question from our student Bevan. In your experience, are there any specific areas that juniors tend to struggle with? Advice on how to overcome the struggles that you may have in the early days of your career.
Yeah, so I actually did take the time to think about this, because I created a reel about this before. And so I want to highlight 4 points, and also how to, I guess, combat or overcome it. So the first is that everything needs to be perfect. That's not only in design, but I guess in life in general. The act of pursuing perfection would only stop you from doing so many things. And so understanding that things might never be perfect, or there has to be trade-offs in the decisions you make, is really important. The second one is that you need an answer for everything. I think especially as someone who, for a designer who's just started their design journey, it's just important to recognize that you don't know anything, and you don't have to know everything. It's really tempting to want to feel prepared to take the next step, whether it's applying for a job or starting an account on Instagram. But I think it's important to embrace the uncertainty and just have an open mindset to keep learning. And the third one is that you must follow every step of a design process that you either learn through the internet or bootcamp. So those are kind of something that we reference after. It's a good framework to have, but it's not always, it doesn't always apply to every single situation. Like we say as designers, it depends. And so you really have to understand the scope, the budget, the time of your project, and see what methods or process works best for that particular project. The last one is not building relationships. Like I said earlier, it's really important to find your allies, especially as a design team of one and in a startup environment. That helped me a lot in gaining trust and getting buy-in. It's also a lot of learning how to speak to your coworkers, what resonates with them in a developer or in a PM perspective. So yeah, these are the 4 things that I want to highlight.
Super valuable. I especially liked, and I even commented on following blindly the UX design process. And I think that it's becoming common knowledge. And I hope that we communicate this to our students and to everyone out there, that when you go in an interview, and this is an example that Radu likes to give oftentimes. So when you go in an interview and people ask you, why did you create a persona or a particular deliverable? And your answer is because that's the process, then you probably won't get that job. So there has to be a reason behind, there has to be intent and purpose to everything you do throughout the design process, and every process for every challenge will look different. So there is not this unique size fits all. And yeah, so this is really important. And I think that it's one of the most common mistake that junior designers tend to make, because somehow I understand why it's happening. People don't have confidence yet in themselves. They need to have some sort of control. They need to have some sort of method. So it's really hard to improvise when you're on your first or second project in your life. But at the same time, this idea, I think, has to be built in your design career, even from its early days, that you will be doing things with purpose and with meaning. And so you find out something. So you, at every step in the design process, you need to find out something. So you have, let's say, I will oversimplify, but you have an assumption and you need to find out things about it, right? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be just validate. You might find out things that work in both ways, and that's fine. So yeah, really good points, and it's something that we strongly feel about as well. So because we have like 15 minutes before we hit the 1 hour mark, I just want to ask everybody in our lovely audience to prepare questions for the live Q&A that we will be opening after this last question that I will ask. So yeah, I will ask another question, and then everybody from the audience, our students, everyone else, will be able to ask you a couple of live questions before we wrap up at around 8. So my last question is, if it's from our student Bevan, and the question is, do you have any recommendations for books, articles, videos by women or BIPOC designers?
Yeah, so this is a tough one. I was actually on a similar hunt about a year ago, basically reflecting on the books I read throughout my design career and the recommendations that sometimes come up during conversation when you ask a friend what to read. And I can't help but notice how skewed and underrepresented the publishing field is in general, and which also kind of connects to one of my goals in diversifying publishing. Yeah, so I came across this Medium article that took Envision's recommended reading list for designers back in 2019 and put all the authors from that list into one image. And so it's an 8x8 grid, and only one row was women. And so from there, I kind of just was on the hunt. I wanted to change. I want to contribute to, I don't know, just supporting authors of women or color. So here are 5 recommendations, but I was, some of them I have read it, some of them not. I still need to get into it. But so the first one is called Design Justice. My design community knows very clearly that I often talk about it. It's by Sasha Costanza Cha. So maybe I can like include the list somewhere afterwards, but that's one. And then The Making of a Manager by Julie Zhu. This is like a really classic, popular one. Design as an Attitude by Alice Rawthorne. Integrating the Eurocentric Design Canon by Nancy Kello Matidi. I hope I didn't butcher any of these names. And then the last one is Conversational Design by Erica Hall, which I believe Iona also talked about in her on her platform. So here are some to begin with, but I definitely think there are a lot of, like, as valuable as this question is, there are still a lot of things that need to be done, or awareness needs to be raised around this topic in the design community. It's something that as a community we need to work on together, and it's also not like a solvable solution in the near future. So I think I really appreciate this question, and yeah, I'm really happy that I'm able to even share this, because it's also something that I constantly think about, especially as a woman of color in the design community. And so yeah, thanks for letting me share this little thing that is really close to my heart. So
thank you, Bevan, for asking the question. I don't know if Bevan is on or she will see the recording, but thank you. And I also want to add by Erica Hall, Just Enough Research, which is a book that I think that everybody should read, not just designers, because everybody will be able to understand the work of the designer better if they read this book and the purpose of design. And I think it's really, it's so to the point that everybody will get value out of it. So even product managers, developers, whatever role you have in your company, Just Enough Research will help you figure out many things around the design role. Okay, so with this being said, if there's anybody in our audience who wants to jump in and ask Marisa a question, now's the moment to do it.
And I'll
Yeah.
kindly ask everyone to, if they want to ask a question, please raise your hand, use the function in the Zoom so we don't all talk over each other.
It's a good point. Because even if you don't have your questions ready, I can ask further questions from the audience. But yeah, I'm giving the opportunity to people to jump in. So I don't even, okay, so where's the raise hand?
It's on the
chat, I think.
We had a call coming in, and I think we had a question in
the. I'm sorry.
We had a question in the chat. Let me see if I can find it right in the beginning.
And I think that Andrea raised her hand right now, or was I?
No, I just raised it to check where it is.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. So if nobody has any questions right now, I know that somebody was asking about podcasts at some point in the comments, and this was also a question that came out on the Instagram question sticker that I posted. So yeah, I think that it's an interesting topic that everybody is excited to talk about. So Marisa, what are your favorite design podcasts? What are your go-to design podcasts?
Okay, I'm muted. Yeah, I tend to just stick with what I like. I noticed that if I try to diverge too much, especially on podcasts or articles, I end up just being in the rabbit hole and not sticking to basically not sticking to new episodes. And so I want to recommend two that I really like. One is 99% Invisible. It's kind of how I got into design also at first. There are definitely little moments that I didn't talk about previously, but that was one of it. It's almost like seeing how things around us are designed and has, like Iona said, are intentionally designed, makes me really want to be a part of that and create great design, if that's even a thing. That it's it's really hard to define great design, but yeah. And the second one is Design Life by Femke and Charlie, and they are also influencers on Instagram and YouTube. And what I like about their podcast is that they are also designers in the field, but they also do a lot of side projects on their own. And they talk about how to balance between the two, how to build your own voice, how to build your own brand. And it's also something that I'm really curious about, obviously, as I start building my community on Instagram. So these are the two podcasts that I listen to that I would recommend. Yeah.
Great. I'm also a big fan of 99% Invisible. I wrote about it in the comments just earlier, so totally.
Oh, cool.
It's like it very much builds on top of what you said of expanding your interest and exploring different worlds, not just the design world. So we have 4 or 5 questions already in the chat. I will ask 4 of them because we don't have. So maybe we try 5, but let's go for 4 right now. So a question is, what are the key skills that designers need? Are soft skills more useful than technical?
Great, I love this question. So one thing I always talk about is that after these years of experience being a designer, I almost feel like designer as a role or job is more of a it's more of a role where you have to interact with different people. It's a people skill demanding job. You have to know how to communicate. You need to know how to present your ideas. You need to get buy-in. You need to solve those misalignment issues between different teams. There are so many problems that end up being a people problem instead of a pixel problem. Like you never see like, oh, because this pixel is wrong, that's why the product failed. Like you never hear that. It's always about how people work together. It's always about making the right decision. And so that's the soft skill that I would push for a junior designer to maybe look more into it or try to train yourself. I think it's also applying that design mentality towards interacting with people. So not jumping to conclusions so quickly, trying to understand the other person's perspective. So kind of just using your design mentality and apply that in a office or in a organization setting, and try to see your coworkers, the people you have to work with as users, and try to understand their motivation, their pain point, and then go from there.
Great points, and yeah, indeed, a great question. I'm also excited to talk about soft skills all the time, but I will I will not do it this time. Okay, so the next question is, if you could do magic and ask for anything to do your work better, what would that thing be? Do you have anything in mind? What would magically enhance your work? I know that you're super passionate about sharing all the latest tools that can enhance your workflow. I know that you do that on like a very consistent base. Do you feel like there's any tool missing or anything missing, like people understanding design faster?
Yeah, I think it would definitely be toolkits around evangelizing design within a community. I feel like that's not a topic, or people talk about it, but there's not a lot of tools or methods around it. We always are so focused on the work we do ourselves, how to increase productivity in terms of an individual, how to organize your day, how to onboard into a new company. But what is lacking is, I guess, also why I started Design Team of One is because I was inspired by the book UX Team of One, and just the amount of books that there are talking about evangelizing and being a team of one is not a lot, which is why I started the platform. And so I think if magically we can get more resources or workshops or sharings on around those topics, it would be great.
Okay, I have two last questions that I want to ask. So one of them is from one of our students, and another one is around design influencers. But I'll go first with Shardae's question. What do you not like about UX UI? This is interesting.
Yeah, I guess I think one of the biggest struggles being transitioning from junior to a senior designer is that, like what I talked about, instead of focusing on the work you do, you kind of have to deal with people. Although I'm a big fan of understanding human behavior and motivations, I think dealing with people isn't always my favorite thing to do. And I know people are difficult. Like that's just something we all have to deal with, whether it's working together, solving conflicts. And it's not my favorite part. Like I have to admit, it's not my favorite part, but definitely am more comfortable doing it now, and also develop some skills around it. So that would be my cons towards a UX designer.
Yeah, it's actually very people facing job. So it's not client facing, but you will be facing people that, like I said earlier, everybody feels like they have some design understanding, some design knowledge. So that tends to be frustrating very quickly. But yeah, I think it's with every role that has to collaborate and has to foster alignment and clarity in teams. I think it's a struggle every time, but I think we all relate to your answer. And the last question is, it's interesting because you can answer both from a design influencer, if you want, perspective, but also from a person that consumes content by other creators out there. How should junior designers consume content from design influencers? With caution is my answer, but what's your answer?
Yeah, I love that. I don't think I ever took the time to think about that too much. I definitely did think about the impact that my material will have on designers. And one thing that I'm very intentional in doing is not just promote tools. And I really, there are reels where I talk about how to get developer buy-in, how to bridge between functional teams. And so those are the content where I value more, and I really want people to see the value in those too. Even though it turns out tools videos usually have more views, and metric wise, it's just incomparable, but it's a lot of reminding myself what is important to me. And I think as an audience, you should be able to see what is important to that designer when you look at their content, when you follow them, when what values are they putting out, what mentality are they preaching. And so as hard as it sounds with not looking at numbers, because I know that's what gravitate a lot of people towards, you see numbers and you just feel like there's something good there that you're missing out, so you end up following them. But beyond that, maybe that could be your first step to take when deciding whether or not to follow a influencer. But beyond that, really take the time to just reach out to them and talk to them, learn about their lives, their design process, their struggles, because we're just all designers. Yeah,
it's a really nice, sweet, and honest, and I really resonate a lot with that. I know how the algorithm favors not silly content, but easier content or content that delivers somehow less value. I never understood why. I mean, it's explainable. Definitely, I understand why many people might be more excited to see, let's say, 5 fonts or typefaces that they can use in their next project, as opposed to how to get developer buy-in, which is a bit more, it's less juicier. And so it's understandable. But yeah, I feel that you're a good example. So this is a very nice way to end this conversation tonight. I think you're a very good example of how you can grow still in a time where the content world of Instagram is extremely noisy. It's overloaded. I myself have no idea what I'm doing anymore on Instagram, because it's just so much noise. It's really hard to bring value. For myself, or after 3 years, it's really hard to not repeat ideas and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you're a great example of how to make it by being honest, being authentic, talking about different subjects that have different level of juiciness, so not just very clickbait-ish Instagram posts. And so you did a great job, and I mean, I'm really happy that, so this is a good part about Instagram, that I actually got to meet a lot of interesting people and good designers and have nice conversations. And so for me, it opened a world of insights. And so this is one of the examples that I will now add to my to my collection of examples. This conversation we just had, and I hope that it was valuable for everybody that came in this event. And we had a little mix up with the hours. Not sure if there are any of you who had to change their schedules, because somehow Meetup showed a different time zone than it was supposed to. Anyhow, it happens. Thank you all for joining. We hope we will see you again in future events. We hope I want to invite everyone to go follow Marisa on Instagram. I promise you that there's a lot of value on her account, as opposed to most of the Instagram accounts. She's doing a really good job right now, and you will thank me later. And so thank you so much once again. Thank you, everyone. Especially thank you, Marisa, for taking the time to be here. And for me, it was an insightful conversation. I hope that everybody took something out of it. And yeah. If you want to say something before I say goodbye to everyone, if there are last couple of words that you want to say.
Thanks, Iona. Thanks for the opportunity. It's great.
Okay, so everybody have a good day, evening, lunch, and we keep close on Instagram or on our Mento Slack space or wherever we meet one another. Thanks again for joining, and have a great time. Bye.